Good evening and welcome to the Selectmen's meeting for July 31st, 2014. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Could I get a roll call, please?
Carolyn Smart present.
Colin McNabb present.
And Sue Licio present. Chairman's additions or deletions. We have one deletion, 3.2. Do I need to read it?
No.
No, okay. 1.4, approval of meeting minutes. There are none. Appointments and hearings, we have none. Moving on to meeting business 3.1, review and discuss alternative gas pipeline route proposed by Beaver Brook Association and review draft correspondence. Andy, you want to give an overview?
Sure. The Beaver Brook Association, which is is essentially a land trust in southern New Hampshire, retained the services of an environmental engineering firm to explore alternative routes for the spur pipeline that goes from the primary Kinder Morgan pipeline that's proposed to run through town up into southern New Hampshire. It's the way that Kinder Morgan has proposed it. It would go up through Pepperell. The engineers for the Beaver Brook Association came up with 3 alternative routes, which are on the map. It doesn't show up all that well on the reproduction of this map, but the one proposed by Kinder Morgan would go up right through the geographic center of, or I should say, the west side of Pepperell. The first 2 alternate routes for the Beaver Brook Association would bring it up through Townsend, and then there's a 3rd alternate that would go up through Pepperell. I understand what their goal is. Their goal is to protect the property that they own, but it's I kind of don't like it because it's saving their own skins at the expense of others. So, which is essentially what we talked about a few weeks ago when we addressed this. So, I did put together a response letter for the board's consideration, and obviously we can tweak that as may be necessary.
Questions? Carolyn?
Yeah, about three and a half weeks ago was when maybe a month ago now, the proposal had come out. When I saw it, I had the same outlook maybe as Mr. Sheehan, that I didn't feel it was appropriate for them to be trying to, or not looking out for their neighbors. It didn't make me happy, their alternate routes. And he thought it was appropriate to write a letter, and he did a really nice job. It was on the agenda last time, but we wanted to wait for you
Okay.
To be here so you could sign it with us.
Okay, and Colin?
I agree.
Ditto?
Ditto.
Ditto, okay.
No,
Yeah,
it's a well-written letter.
I agree with both of you, and
It wouldn't be in the spirit of the coalition.
I don't think
Right.
it's in the spirit of being good neighbors either, so that's fine. Do we need to,
I would make a motion to sign the letter as attached to the record.
Second.
Forward to, and forward to the Beaver Brook Association.
Second.
okay? Been moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Squeezed you into the bottom so we can
You
keep it to one
did.
page.
Do you mind speaking louder so we can hear you?
Okay, we'll yell.
Oh, well, we're gonna have a
What did you
nice-
say?
I'll try to see if we can get the speaker in this. I don't know which one is the whole speaker, but.
People
moved the
don't
mic a little
usually
closer,
have a
Harvey,
problem
maybe
hearing
that'll
me,
Thank you.
but I,
Acoustics in here unless you're on the speaker system.
we
is
will
horrible.
speak, I mean, that concerns me for later, but, okay. Moving on, 3.3, discussion of public records request. Andy?
So we had a public records request for roughly 5 years' worth of emails from Leslie Gabilska and Karen Chapman. As we typically do, we get these occasionally, not a lot of this volume, but occasionally we get large volume requests. We had one a few months ago for some highway department emails, nothing, nothing on this scale though since I've been here. So we put together an estimate of the time it would take for us to collect the emails and then go through them to make sure that there's nothing in there that should not be released to the public, anything related to personnel, which we don't think there is. There may be some items in there that relate to litigation. And so we put that together, and again, it's 5.5 years of Leslie's emails and 2.5 years of Karen's emails. So it is a substantial request. Leslie, what did you guess, like 5,000
Yeah,
emails?
I have 13,000 from when I started here, so, in '01, so I'd say at least 5,000.
Yeah.
Probably more than that, emails. That's the inbox. Then there's the sent ones. Also, that's another 600 since I came here, so another 3,000 or 4,000
Okay.
to go through.
Right, so Carolyn asked that we put this on the agenda for a discussion for tonight.
Yeah, the reason that I'd asked is because we've been through this before. It was actually my emails many years ago that were requested. And under the public records law, I think it's section 10. I apologize, I was really busy today and I didn't get a chance to review the law. But I believe it's 66, section 10. And we have a responsibility to keep exempt from non-exempt records. There was a discussion many years ago actually, about trying to write a software program that would do that for us automatically, but it was too expensive. So the employees kind of have a responsibility to keep exempt emails from non-exempt, and we're not allowed to pass that cost off to the person that's requesting it. We can certainly charge them for their time of
That's what it is.
pulling the information together, but not to review each email to see what's exempt and what's not exempt, because that should have already been done.
How should
I
that
have
have been?
I have a question. I know little about the current email system, which, by the way, I keep saying we need Outlook. And Outlook would handle what you talked about very nicely.
Yeah, I do. I set up file folders on the side, and it allows you to put, you can label them,
Yeah.
work-related,
Okay, so you do have the ability
Oh,
to
yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
I don't know when the direction would have been made to do so, or if the direction was ever made to employees in the past
not
to
that I'm
even
aware
do
of.
that.
Yeah, we had department, but we're talking, that's where we need to review some trainings. I know we had talked about before, but we're talking about 8 or 9 years ago.
Yeah, see, I mean, to me, that's something that needs to go into the employee policies, you know?
No, I agree.
And, I mean, you bring up a really good point there, but,
So I just thought $2,500 was really excessive, and I have a feeling that the Secretary of State's office, I don't know that for sure, but just from what we went through before, like I said, 8 or 9 years ago, they're not going to allow us to charge them for the time to decide whether an email is exempt or non-exempt. And you can certainly
So
check on
we
that
have
for
to-
me, Andy. I'm just going by.
so if I'm understanding you correctly, Carolyn, you're saying that you believe the town has to eat that cost, other than the cost of actually reproducing them?
Reproducing, we can charge for
Okay.
that. And I think you're allowed 50 cents a page and the hourly wage.
Well, this is news to me. I'd never heard that come up before. Have you heard?
I haven't, because in the last couple of requests that we've had, well, the law is specific that you're allowed to charge for the cost of research and redaction or whatever has
Right.
to be done. I don't recall that there's a separate section on email archiving. I can certainly look into that, though.
Yeah,
But
just-
the bottom line is we don't do it. And, it's sort of the backstory of the public records law is that if somebody desires the records and there's a public cost to that, the public shouldn't have to eat that. So, but we can look at that.
Well, I think it's worth looking at.
Well, if let's say we had a folder with exempt emails in it, maybe back and forth to the attorneys. You could charge for the time to go through those, because maybe not
Right,
the whole thing.
I understand totally what
Okay.
you're saying. I do. But that's a going forward, because the reality is that doesn't exist today. Okay, so some employees may be doing that, but if it was not a directive by anyone to all of the employees, then we're kind of stuck. Okay, because it wasn't a directive. If the law says that we should have done it and we have not, that's another story. Okay, but, if the law does not say you have to keep them in a separate place so they're easily accessible, then, as far as I'm concerned, this is a good estimate, okay? If the law says you need to keep them separate to make it easier, or, to separate them, then that's another story, okay?
And like I said, I
So
apologize. I was
can
gonna
we
call the
have you
Secretary of State's
check with
office, but-
town council on that, please?
Yeah.
At the-
Actually, I'll
Yeah.
check with the Secretary of State's
That's-
office,
Whatever.
At the,
because that doesn't cost us anything.
Andy,
Okay.
has Leslie started, Leslie, have you started doing this?
No.
You have
And
not.
It first has to be taken off the servers, and then we go through it.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
So,
And I apologize, I was gonna call the Secretary of State today, it's just today's meeting.
what is the timing on this?
Well, we've responded to the request.
Okay, so
So we
at
did
the
that within the
most,
10-day period.
at the most, we're expecting that to be the cost.
Correct.
At this point, given what we just discussed, it could be less
Could be
than
less
that.
than that.
That's fine. So you gave them, worst case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, as long as they've been notified, I'm fine with that. How you guys on that, okay? Okay, so no vote, but check on the law for us, okay? 3.4, Pipeline Coalition update. Andy, do you have the most recent what's going on? I did not make the meeting Monday.
I do.
I just felt like I wanted you folks to know, and the folks in town to know what is happening.
Yeah, and it's a very fluid situation. I talked before about the municipal coalition that started up. It's already gone through 3 or 4 different names.
We still can't hear.
Oh, you want to hand me the? Just pull it. Is that better? So we've talked before about the municipal coalition, which started about a month, 5 weeks ago, something like that. It continues to be a very fluid situation, and the name and the membership continues to change. Right now, the membership is Ashby, Brookline, New Hampshire, Dracut, Dunstable, Groton, Littleton, Pepperell, Reading, Tewksbury, and Townsend, with participation also by Tingsboro and Wilmington, although they've not yet voted to formally join the coalition. And then I think that may, in some cases, that may just be timing issue. In some cases, it may be they're interested, but they don't necessarily want to step too far into the firing line or something. So the coalition has designated 3 co-chairs to essentially just to run the meetings and sign correspondence that may go out. The co-chairs are Stuart Schulman, a selectman in Groton, Steve Themelis, a selectman in Pepperell, and myself. And the mission of the of the coalition is to gather knowledge and work collaboratively as a coalition of municipalities to provide representation and information to relevant government and public bodies concerning the proposed Tennessee Gas Pipeline project proposed by Kinder Morgan and its effect on our communities. Right now, the big concern is that the affected property owners, whether they be private property owners, municipalities, land trusts, whoever it happens to be, we don't really have a voice or even a seat at the table at the current, under the current process, or under the process that has taken place, and for the foreseeable future, for the next few months anyways. There is the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments, which is the corollary agency to MRPC that serves the Lowell region and serves many of the communities in the coalition and extends as far west as Pepperell, has been helping the coalition. And they put together a PowerPoint presentation that was delivered to the coalition meeting last week, or I guess this week maybe. We've posted a link to that on the website so anybody can go and take a look at that. It's a primarily federal regulatory process. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, is the agency that issues the certificate for a project like this. They also issue certificates for hydroelectric dams and other types of energy generation projects. So FERC will be the primary regulatory agency. There'll be some lesser regulatory review at the state and local level. There will be MEPA process. There will be local conservation commission review, Mass DPU, Department of Public Utilities review. But FERC is really the biggie. So just to give a quick outline of what the schedule is, and this is a schedule I think that Kinder Morgan presented to us on June 25th at the meeting at the high school. That in October of this year they'll be doing what's known as a pre-filing with FERC. It's a sort of preliminary review. If anybody's familiar with the subdivision process in Massachusetts, there's preliminary subdivisions and definitive subdivisions, and this is sort of similar in status to that. Then later in the year, November, December timeframe, there'll be what are known as open house meetings. That's an opportunity for Kinder Morgan to host a series of meetings, one or more meetings, in which they would present the project, including alternatives. In January, February timeframe, there would be what's known as a FERC scoping meeting or a series of meetings. At that point, FERC would be looking and identifying the thresholds that the project may trigger that would be part of the FERC review. For anybody who's familiar with the MEPA, the Mass Environmental Policy Act review process, it is sort of similar to that. And then about a year from now, next September of 15, Kinder Morgan would submit their application to FERC, and the application is for a certificate. I forget, I didn't write down what the certificate is called. I think it's a certificate of need or appropriateness or something along those lines. I apologize that I didn't bring the exact language. And then within a couple of months of that September filing, it's anticipated that FERC would issue their certificate, either approving or denying. And as Alan Four, the Kinder Morgan rep at the meeting in June, said, they've never been denied. They've never failed to get a certificate of approval. That can be viewed one of two ways: that FERC is a rubber stamp for utility developers, or that the utility developers make sure that they have a viable project before they even go forward. So, so in a little over a year, 15 months or so from now, it is conceivable that there could be an approval issued by FERC. There would then be state and local permit review, again under the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act, the Department of Public Utilities, any local reviews, local historic districts that might be affected, conservation commissions, or the Mass DEP for wetlands issues. Anything that comes up from any kind of an archaeological survey, if they come across some Native American burial ground or something like that, that would require some some review. And then if things go well for Kinder Morgan, they could be commencing construction in January of 2017. So if I could back up just a sec, that once they get the FERC approval, which they anticipate in November of 15, they leave themselves about another year or 14 months for the state and local reviews and their final engineering. So once they get the permit, they're not showing up the next day with the excavators. And then the anticipated completion of the project and the pipeline and service would be November of 2018. So for a little more than 4 years away, if things go well for Kinder Morgan in terms of the permitting process. There are opportunities for entities to apply to be what is known as an intervener, so that you would have a seat at the table, you would have an opportunity to comment on the project, submit comments to FERC and to potentially other regulatory agencies. That comes later in the process, and that is addressed in the PowerPoint presentation that NIMCOG prepared for the coalition. And again, that's on the homepage of the town website. So that's about all I know at this point.
Thank you. Uh, 3.5, review and approve Chapter 90 project request from Ed Kukala, Highway Superintendent, in the amount of $308,000 to reclaim and pave the entire length of Emery Road. Andy?
Pretty standard Chapter 90 request from Ed. Emery Road is in pretty bad shape. If anybody has driven it, it's not quite as undulating as it was back in March or April, when the frost was coming out of the ground and it was really heaving, but there is significant deterioration of the roadway. So he is putting in a request for Chapter 90 to reconstruct the entire length of Emery Road.
List that Ed submitted to you of roads he was.
Yes.
I would move to approve the Chapter 90 project request from Ed Kukla, Highway Superintendent, in the amount of $308,000 to reclaim and pave the entire length of Emery Road.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4 spots.
Thank you. Glad you said 4. That helps me count.
I'm gonna price stamps.
No, nobody's getting my signature on a stamp.
Oh, I'm gonna keep it with me. Just make it easy.
On his belt,
Yeah, my utility bill.
right next to your phone.
Thanks for putting I'm just gonna get. Yep. 3.6, review request of Unitil to cross, alter, or construct within a public way for installation of gas service at 62 South Harbor Road.
I would move to approve the request for Unitil to cross, alter, or construct within a public way for installation of gas service at 62 South Harbor Road.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any questions? Not all those in favor?
Aye.
think it's everybody because it says board.
Yeah.
Very tiny. 3.7, review request of Unitil to cross, alter, or construct within a public way for installation of 2 services, one for home and one for business at 77 Emery Road.
I would move that we approve the request for Unitil to cross, alter, or construct within a public way for installation of 2 services, one for home and one for business at 77 Emery Road.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion?
Is that gas as well? 2 services?
2 gas services. Right.
All set? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4.1, review and approve recommendation for the position of Highway Department Fleet Mechanic. Andy?
So we've been without a fleet mechanic for better part of a year now. We've had trouble holding on to a mechanic since Andy Player left about, 2.5, I'd say it's about 2.5 years ago. And we've had a couple of people come and go, and we've advertised a couple of times and had had no takers. Part of the problem that we were finding was that our wages were not competitive. So when we did the last contract with the highway department, the last union contract, we did address that with them, and the union was aware of the fact and recognized that the hourly rate for that position had to go up. So we did bump that up as a result of the contract. And so we advertised, Ed advertised a while ago. We interviewed 3 candidates, and it was Keith Letourneau, Ed Kukla, and myself that did the interviews. And we were all in agreement that a gentleman by the name of Alex Luther is the best fit for the job. We had 3 good candidates, and but we thought that Alex, based on his experience and his training, would be the best fit for us. He's currently a mechanic for the town of Chelmsford, and I forget where he worked previously. I didn't bring the whole file with me, but he's got a good, strong resume in both vehicles and heavy equipment. So we think he'd be a good fit.
Questions?
Andy, at one of the meetings, it was an item that was actually taken off the agenda in regard to a fire department mechanic. Is this something that he could be utilized in that capacity as well?
Potentially. I want to sit down. We interviewed Alex and the other 2 candidates the day before I left for vacation. So one of that did come up after the interviews when Ed, Keith, and I were sitting around talking about this. And I do want to sit down with Chief Boynton and talk to him and see, make sure that we're not going down a redundant path here. There are certain parts of the fire apparatus that really cannot be worked on by your, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but your run-of-the-mill qualified mechanic. They may not have and often do not have the certifications to work on some of the pumps and some of the hydraulics, especially the lift components of the apparatus. But it may be that we can accomplish most of what we're really trying to do with our fire apparatus with this position as well, and may not need to do the separate fire mechanic positions. So I'm going to be sitting down with the chief in the next week or so to talk about that a little bit more and see where that leads us.
So
We've got to buy more mics.
I mean, potentially those areas that just the run-of-the-mill mechanic can't work on. I mean, those are things that don't come up every day. It's something that we may be able to send it out for service or repair, or have somebody come in to do the service work?
That's correct.
Okay.
Carolyn, did you have a comment? I actually have a couple questions, because I honestly don't remember. The fleet mechanic, when we say fleet, which vehicles are we talking about in terms of which departments would be handled by this person?
Pretty much it would be be all of the departments, the entire fleet. There's some vehicles are covered under a warranty. Most of our cruisers are warranted, so they would go out anyways at either no cost to us or we're better off sending it out. Certain specialized equipment like the fire apparatus wouldn't be handled in-house, but sort of the run-of-the-mill stuff, the oil changes, the brakes, any of the fluid-related repairs, some of the less complex hydraulic repairs could be done in-house. And a lot of what we've been lacking over the years is just a routine maintenance schedule, that we're doing oil changes 4 times a year, or whatever the particular vehicle calls for, or piece of equipment calls for. Doing brakes on a regular basis, that we're just keeping up with things. We tend to be, in many ways, and this is not at all a reflection on or criticism of Ed or any of the mechanics that we've had, but we tend in many respects to be reactive rather than active, and the hope of having the mechanic in place, and what Andy Player was very good at doing was when he started, gave everything a sort of quick run through, determined when each piece of equipment was last addressed and serviced, and then developed a schedule that we could adhere to going forward, or that he could adhere to going forward. And whoever we bring in, and whether it's Alex or any of the other candidates that we interviewed, they all said the same thing. You got to start with a baseline evaluation of all your equipment, and go from there in terms of your routine maintenance. So a lot of the maintenance would be, or a lot of the effort would be just in establishing a good database, not even as complex as a database, just it could be as simple as a notebook, but getting a good baseline of service and going from there.
So we're calling this the Highway Department Fleet Mechanic. But this position also supports, like, cemetery, water.
Yeah.
Maybe we should look at taking the word highway out of that, but that's just a thought. It's really not a department, it's a town fleet mechanic, from what you're saying, right?
Yeah, the only reason we
I guess, I mean, I don't have a problem with calling it that, but it's, the title should somewhat describe what that person does, and I think this one makes it sound like, well, it's just for the highway, and it sounds like it's not. So it needs to, we need to think about that. In terms of reporting responsibility, however, I would assume that this position would still report to Ed.
Yes.
Okay.
And just to the prior point that you made, in terms of the title, the position used to be Highway Department Mechanic, and I don't remember when the change was made to Fleet Mechanic, but the goal of that was to broaden it and make it clear that it was for the entire fleet. Some, like the cemetery department, they've got some really qualified guys that can do a lot of the maintenance, a lot of the routine stuff themselves. They may continue to do that. Some of the other departments, and they like to do that. Some of the other departments, it's not as it doesn't make as much sense for them to do it themselves. So the fleet mechanic would do that, and he has to be housed somewhere. There has to be some line of authorities. That's why we call it the Highway Department Fleet Mechanic.
I just have one other thing, and that is, given that you haven't had a discussion with Chief Boynton yet, and my concern is voting approval on this. This, I'm assuming, is a full-time position?
Yes.
Okay. I just hesitate without the whole picture. I feel like I don't have the whole picture of what the town needs without that other piece. So I'm hesitant to go forward and approve this, but on the other hand, I know we need someone. Our next meeting isn't until August 12th.
Correct. So 2 weeks. And this position, we would need to be filling this position whether we take the chief's advice to hire the fire mechanic. So this is a position we've had for a number of years. It's a position that we've been trying to fill and have been unable to. So so the timing has sort of overlapped with the two, but really they're fully independent.
Okay, then I'll change my mind on it. If you're saying we need it regardless of the other one, and that is an additional piece, then I'm fine with it.
The bulk of the work's going to be highway anyway. This position is going to evolve probably over the next year. We're going to have to work on, as part of the budgeting process, because Ed would need reimbursement from the different departments for supplies, oil changes, and those kinds of things. And I know a couple of years ago we did look at a software package so that we could better track the maintenance of all vehicles. So this is really going to evolve over the next year with responsibilities.
So entertain a motion?
So just remind me, Andy, the union contract is their probationary period?
Yeah, I believe it's 6 months.
6 months, and contingent upon a pre-placement physical, I'm assuming?
Yes.
So I would move to approve the recommendation for the position of the highway fleet mechanic and approve the hiring of Alexander Luther, contingent upon a passing of a pre-placement exam with a 6-month probationary period.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4.2, review and approve the recommendation for the position of Building Department Assistant. Andy?
So Sherry Vaughn, who has worked in the building department for about 10 years, has announced her retirement. Her last day is next week. Rich Hanks has advertised the position and has interviewed a number of people, but settled on Janet Levitt, who is holds the position currently of property lister for the assessors. Janet helped out in the past in the building department at sometimes where there were vacancies over there, and so she knows the lay of the land, understands the systems in place there and what the job entails, and so Rich has proposed hiring Janet at 26 hours per week.
Questions?
I just had one. The previous assistant was at the same number of hours, or
She was 30 hours.
she was at 30? Did you have any?
Carolyn?
Yeah, I read the letter that Rich Hanks had submitted, and I think he made a nice choice. The only problem that I have is the starting salary. I understand that Ms. Levitt was making $19.75, I believe. 73. However, the outgoing building department assistant is at $17 an hour. I would not feel comfortable staying at a step 9 in that particular position. Further, there's not enough money in the budget to support that. You know, I have no problem with starting her out at step 2 or step 3, wherever Ms. Vaughn is at now, because she's been with us for 15 years. But the reason she was at a step 9 in the position that she's at, it's the same grade, is because she was already making that money when we did the classification plan, so we wouldn't have taken money away from her, unlike the rest of, or the majority of other employees that started out as a step 1.
The question that I have kind of related to Carolyn's is, well, it is related. Is the intention for Ms. Levitt to leave her current position?
Yes.
Okay. Is this something that would fall under what we would call a department transfer?
Yeah, it would be a transfer from one department to another.
So in cases of a transfer, don't we allow that person to continue to make the same amount of money?
It depends. In this case, both positions are in the same grade. The
Just different level?
different steps within that grade. So obviously, if somebody when somebody goes from a lower grade to a higher grade, we start them at the step that is closest to but above their current rate. When somebody goes from a higher grade to a lower grade, it's a little, it's not as clear cut. It doesn't happen very often. And then typically when somebody makes a move within the grade, they would hold on to their salary. As Carolyn noted, when we did the classification plan, we didn't penalize anybody. We didn't, even if they were more highly paid than the average for that grade, we didn't take money away from them. And I think that's the way that Rich is looking at it. It's certainly the way that I'm looking at it, that we have a good employee, well-established employee with a long track record. They're making they're making their current rate now, making a lateral move within the same grade, and that's why I would support the transfer at the same rate. And the other point that Carolyn made had to do with the budget, and that's correct. It would have to be a supplemental in the fall in order to cover the wages for the entire year.
Even with the hour change?
Yes, yeah. And I forget what the amount is. I think it's a little over $3,000, but I don't recall. So I guess there's a couple of ways that we could approach that. We can either go forward with the 26 hours that Rich has recommended, on the assumption that town meeting will go along with the logic behind the request for additional funding, or we started at fewer hours for now, and still ask for the additional hours if it proves that it is merited. But Rich's concern is that we're going from 30 hours to 26. He was concerned about going lower than that.
My feeling about it is that Ms. Levitt's been with the town for 15 years. I don't feel it's right to penalize her for taking on more responsibility.
Well, Ms. Levitt's been an excellent employee. It's not about the employee, it's about the position. And when we did the comp and class plan, the majority of employees who have been here for many, many, many years still had to start out in step 1. In fact, one that jumps out in my mind was the administrative assistant for the police department, whose responsibilities are probably one of the largest in that class. And there was plenty of argument that longevity and value of employees should be included, and the decision at the Board of Selectmen at the time was no. So, I'd have a hard time justifying it to other employees as well, that while Ms. Levitt did a great job for the assessor, she's a good employee, nothing against her, but when she started for us, she actually was a subcontractor for Tri-Town Assessing, so she was paid at a higher rate when we decided to accept her as an employee. And the first comp and class plan we did in 2004, again, she was higher than what the comp and class plan outlined, and again, it happened again a few years ago when we did it. So where I'm just not comfortable paying somebody more and it picked almost $3 an hour more than what the current building assistant is making, who's been there for 10 years.
How many steps do we have? Is it 12? Or am I thinking of something else? Thanks, Carolyn. So we're saying grade 3, level, well, it says here, step 9, which is the top of the, that's the top of the grade. Who's there?
The current.
Okay, no, I'm not concerned about that. What
So
I'm,
she'd be at 9 with one step above, one step to go.
with one step to go,
Yep.
and then she's maxed out.
Correct.
One of the reasons that you have this, the levels, the steps, if you will, is to allow some growth. Obviously, at that, there isn't a lot of growth, because basically what we're saying is the job is worth a maximum of $20.22, okay? The reality, from my standpoint, is, and as Carolyn said, this is not about the person, this is about the position. But the reality, from my perspective, is if someone is willing to take a job and switch their job, and it's obviously, what level, what step is she in currently?
She's a 9.
Step 9.
Janet is currently a 9.
In the same.
In the same grade.
In the same grade. If it's the same grade, I guess I don't have a problem with it. But she's got to know she's got 1 year and that's it. And her salary's stagnant, basically.
Yeah. Right, so the only time that there would be a change in the rate after she maxes out is if we do a COLA or we do an overall adjustment to the rate in the way that we did this year.
Okay. Do I have a motion that we can either say yea or nay to?
Well, why don't I, this is kind of, I'm not going to support the 1975. I would support grade 3, level 3. I would support the hiring of Janet, not about the person. So I would vote to approve Janet's transfer. I just would not have moved to vote the hourly dollar amount.
Well, we need a motion, we need a motion with a rate that, and unfortunately, it's a package in terms of the motion. So, why don't you make a motion and,
I'll make the motion.
okay.
I move that we approve the recommendation for the hiring of Janet Levitt at the rate of $19.73 an hour for the position of Building Department Assistant,
26 hours a week.
26 hours a week.
And that translates into grade 3, step 9, correct?
Gianna has a question.
I just would like to make one correction. There is a bone of contention with the statement that I was hired as a subcontractor. That's a long ago thing. I did work for more than one town, but I was always an employee. That did come up in past meetings many years ago. I was not a subcontractor, so I just want to correct that statement.
Okay. Moved, seconded?
Yeah, I'll second it, but
Okay, more discussion?
one thing.
Go ahead.
At Colin's motion, we've now approved something that we're not budgeted for.
Do you have a suggestion about that?
We're not supposed to do that.
Andy made it clear about the that we'll have to do something in the fall at the special town meeting.
Taxpayer to appropriate more money if it's available.
Or cut hours.
Right.
Or transfer.
So I would have no
is-
problem at 23 hours if you want to change your vote, because right now we're approving a motion, and of course, we don't have the funding to cover those.
I think we should revisit that in the fall, leave it at the 26 hours
Well,
until the fall special.
Okay, so what we're saying then is, at 1973 and 26 hours, we know that's not going to be enough money in the budget. Come the fall town meeting, we can submit for an additional amount of money. If town meeting does not approve that, then it would have to be a cut in hours at that time. As long as Mr. Hanks and Ms. Levitt agree to that and understand that, you know, we'll say it for now, but it could change come fall. And that's all I'll say about it. Okay? So given that, all those in favor?
Yeah, I seconded it.
Okay, so we have a motion, a second, for the way that it's written. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carolyn, no. What have we got next? We're done. Board of Selectmen updates and reports. I have none. Carolyn? No?
I'm saving mine for the 12th.
Okay, Town Administrator updates and reports. Well, he's back.
Back, here I am.
We all set,
Good.
or?
Yep, nothing to
Okay.
report.
5.3 really should
Oh, yeah, shouldn't need to be on that.
it should not have been on there. Okay, move to take no action, second? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. And we are,
Oh, wait.
motion to
Recess or,
recess to the special town meeting.
and adjourn.
Somebody want to do that?
I would move to recess to the special town meeting at 7 o'clock.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.